Or if anyone has questions at the end, we will definitely do a Q&A. If we run out of time, then I will be over at Quills and Sofas, and I'll be more than happy to answer any of your questions there. So, with that out of the way, we'll get started. I can get it a little bit closer. Yeah, I can get a little bit closer for you. Can everyone hear me all right? Yeah. All right, well, thank you very much for showing up tonight. You guys enjoying BronyCon so far? All right, glad to hear it. This panel is So You Want to Write About Ponies, How Fan Fiction Helps a Fandom, or Why. I am your presenter, Cyborg Samurai, and I apologize in advance. I'm just kidding. I left it at home, unfortunately. So as I said, this is a presentation, and I will try to go through it as quickly as I can, but I feel that the best way to start this presentation is to give you a little bit of introduction about how I got into writing fan fiction before I tell you guys about why it's such a great thing. So, a little bit about me. I got into writing and literature when I was about 3 years old, and it's just always been something that I've been really, really passionate about. I taught myself how to read and write, and I started writing my own stories about going to other planets and visiting aliens and those kinds of things. And then I got into video games not long after that. And the kinds of video games that I was inherently drawn to are the ones that focused on adventure and exploration and strong story development. So it wasn't really surprising that the stories that I started writing from that point on were really focused on those kinds of things. I got into the Ponies thanks to the evil scheming of one of my best friends who may or may not be in this room. He's apparently not, which is unfortunate. But after he got me into it, I started asking myself exactly what it was that really kept me around. Because he showed it to me, but it was me that kept staying here and saying, I still like this show. So the real questions I really wanted to ask myself that question was, why do I like this? And after asking myself that question, I came up with 3 answers. It has a really compelling narrative that offers unique solutions to conflict. You see that they're always talking about friendship, and that seems to be kind of the key moral for the story. But more than that, it's just something that just rolls through everything. It's just very unique. You don't see it anywhere else. There is fighting, obviously, season 4 finale, cough, cough. But exactly. It also has complex world building that is strongly rooted in traditional fantasy, which is something that I am extremely a sucker for. It was just like, when I saw the Manticore in the premiere, I was just like, okay, I'm hooked. You got me. Game over. And the last thing was something that you don't see a lot in video games, unfortunately, and that is competent, diverse, non-sexualized female protagonists. So you don't see a lot of it. You don't see a lot of it in video games, and that is something that is unfortunately true. So I had not had a lot of experience with fan fiction writing before I got into Ponies, but it was something that I had seen a lot of on websites like Equestria Daily. And up to that point, all I really knew was the negative stereotypes that come with fan fiction that I'm sure that a lot of you are aware of, that all of it is nothing but shipping and it's all terrible and it's just something you don't want to be associated with. But then I realized I never thought in a million years that I would be interested in a show about colorful cartoon ponies, and I was very wrong about that. So maybe I'm wrong about fan fiction as well. So that was really what got me into fan fiction, reading it, taking a look at it, and not long after that, that was when I had what I like to call the wouldn't it be cool if moment. You see something that you like, something that just sparks your muse. You just look at it and you say, oh my gosh, that was so cool that that happened. But wouldn't it be cool if this happened instead? And that's how the thing starts to go. And when I had that moment, I realized, it might be really fun to actually try my hand at this. But before I did it, I had some real serious questions that I wanted to have answered. I knew why I wanted to write fan fiction, because I had my wouldn't it be cool if moment. But what about other people? Why do they want to write fan fiction? Because it is not something that you can make money off of. So surely that my reasons for writing fanfic couldn't be the same as everyone else's, could they? Another question I had was, why all the negative stereotypes? There are a lot of them, and it was the only thing that I knew up to that point. So where did all those come from? And adding on to that, why would people read fan fiction still if all of the negative stereotypes are what everyone always sees? Because these things are being posted on things like Equestria Daily. And lastly, you see a lot of disclaimers on fan fiction, and I wanted to know, what was the deal with those? Is fan fiction illegal? Probably a good question to ask if you're considering this as a hobby. So I did a little bit of research, and I found opinions for and against. I saw both sides of the argument, but at the end of it, I decided to go through with it. I decided to write fan fiction, and I've been doing it for 2.5 years. I do not regret that decision at all, and I believe that fan fiction is a great thing that not only benefits its writers or its readers, but the fandom as a whole, and that is what I'm going to try and convince you of tonight. Now, I understand the irony of giving a disclaimer when I just talked about one, but I am a student at the University of Minnesota Twin Cities. And one of the things that we emphasize heavily at the U of M is that if you are delivering any kind of information to a group of people, then you need to be upfront and transparent about what it is you're trying to achieve, what your motives are, why you're doing it in the first place. So, here you go. This is a persuasive speech being delivered by a fan fiction author. Just a little bit of bias there. This is just my opinion. I would consider myself to be educated on this because I have done a fair amount of research on it, but I do not have all the answers, and I do not claim to be right in any way, shape, or form. So now that we're on the same page, we'll move on. The way this presentation is going to work is that I'm going to break it down into 5 parts. We're going to take a look at the writers first and how fan fiction benefits them. We're going to look at the readers, then we're going to look at the fandom as a whole, because not all the things that benefit the writers or the readers works. We're going to take a look at the creators and the owners of the source material to get their opinions on it, and finally what the law has to say. So, let's start with the writers. Why do people write fan fiction? Anyone who has tried their hand at writing will tell you it is a tedious, solitary experience that can take a lot out of you physically and mentally. Why would people take the time to write stories about other people's work? Well, there are lots of reasons, and after finding the research and taking a look at it, I found out that I was right. Well, I was actually wrong. The number one reason people write fan fiction is because of passion. Fans write and publish fan fiction due to a love and appreciation for the universe that it's set in. I'm going to give you an example. Take a look at the end of Season 2, Canterlot Wedding. Chrysalis and the Changelings just got blasted off Team Rocket style. You just watched that, and now you're in between the Season 2 and Season 3 hiatus. You got a lot of time to kill, but you still are very appreciative of My Little Pony. You like this universe. You like what has happened. You start to think to yourself, wouldn't it be cool if Chrysalis vowed vengeance and she decided to get revenge on Equestria, so she decided to go back and take a different approach to infiltrating the Equestrian government, but something happens and the main 6 find out about it, but it's too late at this point, so now they're trying to scramble to do damage control, and all the time they're super paranoid about who's a changeling and who isn't. It turns this giant cloak and dagger story. Congratulations, you've just started the first step in writing fan fiction. That's really all it is. It's just people see something, they love it, their muse, their minds take off with it, and then you want to put it to pen and paper. The next thing is creative and artistic freedom. Now, you are going to run into rules regardless of where you publish, be it on pen and paper or online. However, through the medium of online fan fiction, you are generally going to run into less restrictions, and it is easier to be published on an online fan fiction site than it is through the professional publishing industry. What does this mean? It means that fan fiction has the potential to tackle more difficult or more controversial issues that would not possibly be accepted through the professional industry. Rhetorical analysis is something that every single writer, regardless of fan fiction or professional, has to do. No matter what kind of plot your story has, you have to take a look at what the characters, what they're doing, why they're doing it, what events took place in their lives to make them the person that they are, the other characters in the story, as well as the events that you are going to have happen to them. How is that going to affect them? How is that going to affect the world? Taking a look at why characters do what they do and what events took place in their lives to make them the person that they are can actively shape your writing into something stronger. This is kind of an obvious one, is fan fiction writing is, well, just writing in general, is good practice. If you want to be a writer, you gotta write. Now, my background is in video game development, so I'm going to draw a parallel from that. If you want to work in game development, say you want to be an animator, or you want to be a modeler, or a texturer, or what have you, you are not going to create an entire game by yourself from scratch just so you can practice your animation. Sure, you'll get practice with animation, but you're going to get practice with everything else, and that would be incredibly inefficient. So what do? You take an existing game, and you work on the thing that you want to do. If you want to be an animator, then you're going to work with the dev tools, and you're going to create your own animations for models that already exist and put them in the game. This is called modding. Fan fiction is much the same. If you want to practice just character development, if you want to just practice world building or pacing, you don't need to create your entire new story from scratch. You can just delve right in. The universe is already there. Just create the story that gets the practice that you need. Exposure and feedback is very important. You are not going to get better if you do not show people your work. Your opinion about your own work is very important. You should enjoy and think that what you have written is good. However, your opinion is biased. You need to have other people tell you what they think. And as Hollywood shows us, sequelitis is a big problem. People are more likely, I'll get to your question at the end. People are more likely to go and see a sequel than they are to a new IP. Why? Because they already know that there are elements in there that they're going to enjoy. They already know who the characters are. They're already acquainted with the world, and they like it. It's the same thing here. People are more inclined to read stories and places and about places and characters they already know rather than entirely something new. And as far as feedback and exposure goes, a part of you has said, as you wrote this story, I like what I've done here. I think it's cool. I want to share it with other people. Now, if you write a story for yourself, that is absolutely great. But then, if you've written that story just for yourself, then you shouldn't feel the need to share it with anyone else. In the moment you post your story on any kind of public medium whatsoever, then you have no longer just posted that story for yourself. You have posted that story for your readers as well. We do this because we love having the chance to improve. We love getting feedback to hear what other people think so we can get better. And the last thing is community involvement. These online communities that I've been referring to assist writers in a myriad of different ways. I'm going to be drawing my examples here from Fanfiction because obviously, well, this is BronyCon. And I write fan fiction for My Little Pony. But Fanfiction isn't the only place that these examples exist. They exist on all other kinds of fan fiction sites. They exist on fanfiction.net. They exist on the Harry Potter fan fiction sites, pretty much everywhere. These online communities have groups that allow writers to submit their stories for review. There are places for writers and editors to be able to meet up so that the editors can take a look and get the experience that they need editing, whereas the writers can get the feedback that they need, which is something we do pre-reading. There's also writing competitions. Writing competitions are great because they give you a prompt. So not necessarily you're going off of something that you thought of, now you're going off of something someone else gave you. That is a challenge that you wouldn't necessarily do yourself. And lastly, online communities have the potential to provide a free, safe, constructive environment for aspiring authors to improve. So those are the writers. What about the readers? I think it's fair to say that more people are reading fan fiction than ever. On Fanfiction alone, the most popular stories have view counts numbering in the tens of thousands, with a few notable overinflated ones having more than that. But what has changed in recent years? Why is there a sudden boom? Sorry, I skipped a slide. But the big thing is the internet. Originally, fanfiction authors only would share their works with like-minded individuals in their immediate geographic location. But with the internet, all of that changed. Geographic location isn't a factor anymore. You can share your stuff with people around the world who have the same likes and interests as you. With this in mind, it's fair to say that there wasn't really a boom here. The demand didn't come out of nowhere. It was always there. It's just that the main problem was geographic location. We just didn't have a medium for fan fiction to be enjoyed. Now we do. But there's more problems with the internet. It is a double-edged sword. Remember those negative stereotypes I was talking about? Well, the internet is a big part of that. Because online fan fiction sites have no barrier to posting one's work, that means you are going to get the entire spectrum of skill from these fan fiction stories. And just like everything else in the world, for example, professional basketball players, there are a lot of amateurs and very, very few professionals. Does that mean that, discredit basketball as a whole? No, absolutely not. It just means that the people who are professionals have put forth the time and the effort to improve. But because of that, there are less professionals than there are amateurs. So that's why you see more of the amateur level stories who commit the amateur level mistakes. There are also problems with, amateur plots as well. No pun intended there. There are good stories, but people don't have the time, or at least they think they don't have the time, to dig through all these amateur stories to find the good ones. Yes, there are ways to kind of have the good stories rise to the top, but because fan fiction is such a relatively young medium, those systems are still growing, they're still developing. Pop culture is another one. Anyone who's obviously taken a look at, what's being released from Hollywood lately will tell you that nerd culture is much more accepted than it was even 10 years ago. I mean, San Diego Comic-Con, how many people showed up to that? Guardians of the Galaxy just came out. How many comic book movies do we have out now? All of these things mean that nerd culture is more socially accepted, which in turn means that all the things associated with nerd culture are more socially accepted, such as fan fiction. Now, this one will be a bit strange, and I'm going to read an excerpt from a paper that I did because I feel that it describes the point I'm trying to get across here. With stretches of time sometimes lasting for years in between releases of canon, many fans are left dissatisfied and wanting more. Fan fiction works to satisfy a fan base that's chomping at the bit, keeping interest alive until proper canonical content can be released. This practice results in more fans maintaining an active interest, which allows word of mouth to continue to spread, which in turn draws in new fans and keeps the source material in the realm of popular culture. Enough said. The last one is, not to toot my own horn or anything, but using this panel as an example, there are more things like this happening. There are more advocates for fan fiction who are saying this isn't such a bad thing. There is actual good here. It's just that we're fighting against stereotypes, and there need to be people to step forth to explain what's going on here. Now, let's take a look at the fandom. What exactly is it that how all of fan fiction benefits the fandom as a whole? Well, the first one that immediately comes to mind is free publicity. The most effective means of sharing is word of mouth. People are more inclined to trust the testimonies of friends and loved ones over anything else. And the more involved a person or a group of people is involved in something, the more enthusiastic they're going to be about it. For example, let's just say that you have no experience with My Little Pony whatsoever, and you stumble upon a My Little Pony fanfic, whatever one it is, and you love it. You think it's great, you know, it's just like the greatest thing you've ever read. You start ranting and raving about it to your friends. That is free publicity. You have just started advocating for My Little Pony. And even if you convinced one other person to take a look at that fanfic, and that person then is curious enough about My Little Pony to start watching the source material, then you have just given My Little Pony free publicity. Next one is actually from, the next two slides are from this thing called Brony Study that was just conducted here. One of the people who behind it is actually here. I actually spoke to him about 15 minutes before this panel to thank him for doing that study. Brony Study was a longitudinal study that took place over the course of 2 years to figure out what exactly is going on with the Brony phenomenon. Why is this happening? What's the mentality and psychology of the people who are interested in ponies? They found a lot of really, really cool stuff, and if you have not taken a look at Brony Study, there's so much information in there. I highly, highly recommend you go take a look at it. But that's where the next few things here are from. So, online communities allow fans to connect with others outside their geographic location and serve as an activity that the fan can focus on, providing a sense of meaning and purpose to their lives. In addition, while not an uncommon trait when compared with other internet fandoms, being based on an animated cartoon series in the internet age with video, sound, and photo editing programs readily available provides a rich source of material for creative expression. This can be seen in the proliferation of pony fan art, music, fan fiction, video games, plushies, blogs, personalized avatars, and animations. In essence, the more extensive the creative or artistic expression, the more likely it is that individual fans will find a niche or place in the community that speaks to them. So basically what this means is that the more diverse, the more rich a fandom becomes, the more likely they are to attract people from all different kinds of interests. For someone to walk in and say, there's something really cool here. I want to stick around and see what it has to offer. In addition, I didn't say before. In addition, fan fiction has the opportunity to tell stories that other mediums can't, and that the canon itself cannot tell. For example, a story doesn't necessarily translate well into a song, and a song doesn't necessarily translate well into a story. So now we're going to move to the creators and the owners of the source material. Fanfiction has been around for hundreds of years. It's been around for as long as there have been stories. People have told those stories to other people, and the people who have heard them suddenly said, you know, wouldn't it be cool if? It's not something new. From Shakespeare to H.P. Lovecraft to J.K. Rowling, fanfiction's been written, shared, and expanded upon with other like-minded enthusiasts. But what about the professional authors? What do they think about this? Well, I have some quotes here, and I will share those quotes with you. I will do my best to give you the context of those quotes so that you won't think that, oh, you know, this person is bad or whatever. Sorry, I got out of hand. But it does depend on who you ask. Some are for it and some are against it. So, my characters are my children. I don't want people making off with them. Using someone else's world is the lazy way out. And besides, no one gets to abuse the people of Westeros but me. Mr. Martin has outlined many, many times why he does not like fan fiction. He's written entire blogs about it. He's been interviewed on it. He is completely and totally justified in his thoughts, and it's perfectly okay why he thinks things that he does. Completely and totally okay. Next one. I do not allow fan fiction. The characters are copyrighted. It upsets me terribly to even think about fan fiction with my characters. Anne Rice, for a long time, did not like fan fiction, and she was very vocal about it. In recent years, she's been more tolerant of it, and she explained her reasons for why she thought the things that she did. And lastly, I will sue because if I do not act vigorously to protect my copyright, I will lose that copyright. So fan fiction, while flattering, is also an attack on my means of livelihood. Orson Scott Card is to fan fiction what Jack Thompson is to video game development. He is enemy number one. Now, again, like Miss Rice, Mr. Card has, in recent years, been more tolerant of fan fiction, and he's more okay with it. However, I do not think that the decades he spent saying things like this should be so easily forgotten. Now, here are some people that are for fan fiction. I am very flattered by the fact that there is such interest in the Harry Potter series and that people are taking the time to write their own stories. Please make sure that the stories are not obscene and that they are credited to the author and not me. J.K. Rowling, the billionaire, she's not important at all. It was very, very, very surprising when she came out and she said that she supported fan fiction. She said this actually through her publisher, and this is a slightly reworded quote, but she's been interviewed on it through several British magazines that she actually is very supportive of it. She has her own stipulations, but that's completely and totally understandable. I think just about everyone in a fandom at some point is inspired to write something. Fan fiction now is a huge growth area. People do it for the fun, often in quite a professional way, just to be published on the internet and maybe be admired by others. Terry Pratchett, again, he's a very, very popular author of the Discworld series. This particular quote was when he was in an interview for BBC again. He was talking about what fan fiction was like when he was first starting and how he would go to these science fiction conventions and he would meet with all these different kinds of people to get ideas, and it was really, really cool hearing him talk about it. And lastly, professionally, we are discouraged from it as any unintended similarities to actual episodes can lead to legal problems. However, I know that if the internet were around when I was very young, I would have been a pretty rabid fanfic writer myself. So more power to you all. How about a hand of applause for Lauren, eh? Lauren has been so unbelievably supportive of the Brony fandom in general. And while it wasn't entirely surprising that she took this attitude towards fan fiction, it still makes me smile every time I read it. So, the real question is, why is there such a split? Well, there are a lot of reasons. We will take a look at some of them. The biggest one is a lack of control. Authors are worried and they're just afraid because they feel that they have no control over what's happening to their characters. You talk to any author and they'll tell you about all the effort that they spent into creating these characters and getting their mentalities right and why they're doing the things that they do through all the rhetorical analysis that they've done. Just imagine if you spent years developing a character and became so intimately acquainted with them, would you really be okay with someone who'd known it for maybe a month to jump into their shoes and write that character effectively? It's a little bit understandable. But more than that, the big concern with online fan fiction specifically is because they do not have any control over what shows up in a Google search. And that can be a problem if you don't have safe search turned on. Another issue is confused or feel threatened. This was Miss Rice's problem. She just didn't understand what fan fiction was. She thought it was, like Mr. Card had said, an attack on her livelihood. She thought that people were literally trying to steal the universe that she had created. And that is not an uncommon misconception. It's kind of a problem that runs in terms of the generational gap. This argument in general is a generational thing. It's never going to really die, but it will become less pertinent as time goes on, as more and more become acquainted with the digital age and how information sharing works now these days. Which leads me to the next point that, yeah, the argument is largely generational. Now, there are some notable exceptions to this, probably one being billionaire J.K. Rowling, but you will notice that if you were to take a survey of the authors who were for and against fan fiction, you will notice that a pattern does start to arise in that the people who have a problem with it are generally best-selling authors. Mid-list authors are completely and totally flattered by it. They absolutely love that they have fans that want to play in a universe that they have created, that they are that passionate about the things that they've made that they said, I want to create my own stories based off of something that you've done. So, what about the law? Where does fan fiction stand legally? Well, that's a very difficult question. And again, it does depend on who you ask. Some people say it's legal, some people say it's illegal, and others say it might be legal, it might be illegal. It's hard to say. So, again, full disclaimer, I'm a business student, I'm not a law student. So, I have done research on this, but if there are any people who are more acquainted with the law in here and I completely and totally butcher an interpretation of the law, I apologize. But here are the laws, according to the United States, that are pertinent to fan fiction. First one is obviously the First Amendment. Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof or abridging the freedom of speech or of the press or of the right, da-da-da-da-da-da. You all know what it is. You've all been to high school, or you're all in school. What does this mean? It means it is a promise that the government will not make a law that prohibits your rights to the things that are listed in the First Amendment. And while you could do an entire hour presentation on what the First Amendment truly means, for the purposes of this presentation, that's what you need to know. Now, the problem starts to arise when your right to free speech starts to interfere with other people's rights to free speech. And there's also another problem, which is called Article 1, Section 8. To promote the progress of science and useful arts by securing for the limited times to authors and inventors the exclusive right to their respective writings and discoveries. What does that mean? It means that if you make something, you own it. And you can do whatever you'd like to it. And you control it, and you control who can do what things to it. Article 1, Section 8 and the First Amendment are almost contradictory. And they butt heads a lot, and there is a lot of confusion over who falls where and what does more. But not even done there. There's more to it. The Lanham Act is better known as the Trademark Act, and it was passed in the 1940s. A trademark is any word, term, name, symbol, device, or combination thereof used in commerce to identify a service or good. Now, to establish a trademark, you need a source identifier that identifies your mark for a good or service. This can include a fictional character's name or likeness. You're starting to see how this is relevant. If a trademark holder can prove that a creation is a source identifier, they can file a trademark infringement claim against anyone who uses it without permission. Does this happen? Yes, but this is very, very, very hard to do. It is hard to prove that you have a source identifier, and it is even harder to prove that trademark infringement has been committed. And the main reason why it's so hard is because of a little thing called fair use. Now, there are two versions of fair use. There is the trademark version of fair use, and there's the copyright version of fair use. We're just going to be talking about copyright fair use, because trademark fair use is relevant, but not as relevant. In determining whether the use made of a work, any particular case, is a fair use, the factors to be considered shall include those four things that are very confusing. What do they actually mean? This is what they mean. Why do you want to use the copyrighted material? Are you trying to make money because that is a no-no? What is the original copyrighted material in the first place? What was it intended to do? How much of the copyrighted stuff are you going to be using, and is it going to make up the majority of your work? And lastly, is your work going to hurt the sales of the copyrighted material? These things are very, very difficult to prove, and as such, fair use is determined on a case-by-case basis. The courts cannot just pass a blanket law that outlaws all kinds of fan fiction. They have to look at each individual case, and they have to determine whether or not a trademark infringement claim or a copyright infringement claim has been committed. Now, there have actually been cases in the past where a owner of a source material has gone after a fan fiction writer. It has happened. However, it is extremely rare, and 9 times out of 10, the fan fiction writer was doing something they shouldn't have been doing in the first place, i.e. trying to make money. And legal action is not the first step that a copyright or source holder will jump to. Typically, they will issue some kind of cease and desist letter first. They will, whether it's, like official, it comes from a lawyer, or if it's just a polite, request to stop. No one likes going to court, and that is not the first step for these kinds of things. So what is protected under fair use? The following: criticism, parody, comment, news reporting, teaching, scholarship, and research. You'll notice fan fiction isn't under there, but fan fiction is considered a transformative work, which is covered under fair use. But does fair use actually protect the things that it says that it's supposed to protect? Most of the time, yes. But here's the problem. There are loopholes in fair use. It can be exploited by people on both sides of the fence. The Copyright Act of 1976 and the Lanham Act of the 1940s were not made with the digital age in mind. And because of that, there are all of these issues that are left without answers. Fan fiction is one of them, and we are left in a gray area. So is it okay? Well, at the moment it is, simply because our laws haven't been updated. Will they be updated anytime soon? Doesn't look like it, but eventually they will, and then we will have a more clear answer. So, in conclusion, I'm going to read you something that, again, was from one of the papers that I wrote about this particular topic that I feel summarizes everything up. Fanfiction allows aspiring authors to experience the feeling of putting thoughts to paper for the purpose of entertaining others. It encourages experimentation with ideas and lets new writers of all ages see if writing is something that they enjoy. It may seem strange that so many people are excited about a long, tedious, solitary process that they can't make any money off of, but most fanfic authors don't see it that way at all. They see writing fanfiction as a tool for learning, a form of flattery, a means of telling the story they know they'll never see. And since money can't be a motivator, their passion has to pick up the slack. The medium of writing struggles to attract the interest of younger generations in an age that's dominated by interactive and multimedia entertainment, and so anything that can constructively do so should be welcomed with open arms. I believe that fan fiction is a wonderful thing. I think that it is something that is a crucial part of any fandom, and the things that I've experienced in the last 2.5 years are all positive things. I have read stories in fan fiction that have made me laugh. I've read stories that have made me cry. I've read stories that have made me take a step back and question my own life choices. I do not think that anything that does that is a bad thing. And now I can hopefully say that all of you can understand why fan fiction helps a fandom. Thank you. So if there are any questions, a moment of silence, please. If we have any questions now, if we have a lot of questions, I suppose Bleeding will be around with the mic. He will help people out. Yeah, you want to just line up? Yeah, if you guys could just form a line right here, I will answer any questions that anyone might have. What's up, Gary? What's up? Oh, wow. Yeah, as soon as you're ready.
People like the mics for these. All right, here we go. as someone who's quite, I advocate fan fiction and stuff a lot, I just wanted to make a little point that George R. R. Martin got his start as a writer writing fan fiction. So that quote of his is so hypocritical, it just makes me laugh
He's not the
and
only
laugh.
one.
Yeah.
Card is even more of a hypocrite. He has written fan fiction based off the Bible. He's written fan fiction based off of Isaac Asimov, and when called on it, he said that it's okay for him to write fan fiction, but no one else. Guy who wrote Ender's Game, ladies and gentlemen.
Hi there. I've seen a number of websites that basically post bad or bizarre fan fiction basically to just make fun of it. And I'm of two minds on that. Like, I think it's good to be critical of creative work, but I also think that, like, it can dissuade novices from starting out and spread stereotypes. So what do you think about that?
So the question was, what do I think about sites that post bad fan fiction and make fun of it?
Basically, yeah.
Well, as I said, I mean, you're going to get the entire range of the spectrum for fan fiction just because of the nature for it. It's, in essence, a training ground for aspiring writers, in addition to being a place that a professional writer could come in and write a serious, great story. So you take a look at other places, and there are sites or like shows online that necessarily, I'm trying to think of a good comparison, but I think that it's just going to always be something that's around. It's just kind of an inherent flaw in the way that fan fiction is currently set up right now. Because there's so many amateurs, there's a lot of content to draw from, it's a source of comedy, people are going to, they're going to exploit that source of comedy.
Assuming that you have gotten to where you want to be with fan fiction, you've gotten good at it, and you've got all these people who are following you, reading all your works, where do you go from there? Once you know that's what you want to do, how do you turn that into an occupation? Where would you get your own original work published?
How would you get your own published after writing fan fiction? Is that
Yes.
the question? Well, there are a lot of different avenues that you could possibly pursue with that. It really depends on your current educational level. If you are, in high school, or if you're at a place where you don't think that you're good enough that you would be able to be published, then fan fiction is definitely a place for you to hone those skills. But if you feel that you're actually at a place where you are confident in what you've done up to that point, and you feel like, I'm ready, I could actually write a story on my own, with my own universe and my own characters, with all of the skills that I have gathered up to this point, then write your own story and send it off. That would be my advice. Does that answer your question? Yeah. Mhm. Yeah. Hello. Go away.
Based on your experience and currently available data, would you suggest that the reading and writing of fan fiction improves the human capacity for kung fu?
Only for robots.
Okay, there we go. Kung fu robot.
Don't meet him in that dark alley.
Just want to know, what's your favorite fan fiction other than your own?
Other than my own. Oh, World of Ponycraft by Captain Chrysalid. My absolute favorite.
Okay, wait. Okay, yeah. So, as somewhat authority on fan fiction and the pony fan fiction, would you say how? I tried to ask this at a couple of the other fan fiction panels, but how would you say how serious authors should take themselves and their story? Because I've seen people vary on saying, "Hey, it's just fan fiction," and then I also see people who say to aspire to novel work. But I also see how much love and attention the writers and the readers, especially the readers, demand of the writer and the dedication they want from them. Oh, sorry. But then they also say, don't get hyped about a quest getting featured in the featured box. Don't get hyped about being in Equestria Daily. So how?
Yeah,
So-
I think I understand what you're asking. My reply would be to be aware of the medium that you are writing in. Fan fiction is not something you can make money off of, and therefore it is not something that you can send off to a publishing company. And you have to also be aware of who your audience is. If you start, you just kind of take a look at who do I think that is going to be reading this? What is my age group? And then once you kind of get an idea of that, once they start telling you, giving you their feedback, you can kind of understand where it is they're coming from. For just to say that someone in elementary school who writes out, this is the best story I've ever read, you should ship it off, it should be a book, versus someone who's actually a publisher or an editor who says, this is the best story I've ever read, you should write a book. Those are two different opinions, and they should not be interpreted the same way. Does that make sense?
So is that a get hyped or don't?
It's okay. Yeah, sure. We only have about 10 minutes. So I'm
I said
going
to keep it brief. We don't have a lot of time.
Fan fiction, as it currently stands, is not something that is taken seriously by professional editors or professional publishing companies. So to try and use it as to say, I've written fan fiction, this is why you should hire me, is not necessarily something that works right now as it currently stands. You can take a look at it, you can say, yeah, this is how I learned these skills, and you can say to yourself, yeah, this is how I learned plot and world building and all these kinds of different things, and kind of look back on it mentally. But to actually post it on a resume, it's difficult to do that right now. Does that answer your question?
Hey, I was just gonna kind of ask, from my experience, it seems like certain mediums of derivative works almost seem to raise more flags for developers than others. For example, I know this panel is kind of mostly dedicated to fan fiction, but it seems like fan games, in particular, seem to get a lot more, C&D problems than say, like fan fiction or fan art. I was just wondering, from your research in copyright and trademark, if, in your opinion, you thought this was legitimately happening, because I just kind of noticed a trend, a correlation, and if you might kind of have a reason why you think might be.
Well, it really depends on the level of exposure. I am assuming you're, for example, Fighting is Magic, that got hit by a C&D. Fighting is Magic got hit by a C&D because it tried to enter the professional fighter circuit, I believe was what happened there. Yeah, it was Evo that they tried to get in on, and that was just a bit too much for Hasbro. So fanfiction, as of right now, is not that popular, and it's not something that they can look at and say, this is definitively cutting into our sales, this is something that is taking away from My Little Pony. People are more interested in fan fiction than they are in the canon of the canon material we're producing. If they ever start to wonder that might be the case, then they might actually take legal action against a specific fan fiction author. But even Penstroke, the most prolific and the most popular fan fiction author, is not that big. He's not that big that Hasbro is saying, Penstroke and Past Sins is taking away from the entire My Little Pony franchise. More people are interested in Past Sins than My Little Pony. So that's kind of why. But things like Fighting is Magic and games, they have a lot of people working on them. They have more hype, and people are more interested. They're worried about those kinds of things. Yeah.
I actually work for a company that's a licensor of Hasbro, so I can actually add a tiny bit more to that.
Sure.
If a company is really eager to I don't want to do it, I don't know for sure if this is the case in this particular case, but if a company makes a product and wants to be the only one who makes that product, they have a license for it.
Mm-hmm.
They don't want competition in the market. So they can go to Hasbro and say, excuse me, these guys are making this game, it doesn't pressure you to make money or something, you should probably leave them.
That is a big thing, and another thing with Fighting is Magic in particular, there were worries that this is a fighting game about a show that is at its core marketed towards 8 to 12-year-old little girls. Yeah. The big thing is it going to make money? Do they feel that it's going to make money? And the way that books like Past Sins have been published is that they don't actually make any money. The money that they charge is just to cover the publishing cost, and no one's actually making bank.
I'd just like to say good evening to you, and my question is, any tips for authors like myself and maybe others who get a little bit too passionate and into the story themselves that they kind of lose track of what they want to look forward to for the readers to enjoy, and it kind of just gets kind of wrapped up within maybe their OCs or other characters that they put into the story?
The more feedback you can get, the better. That would be my advice. To say, again, you have to look, you are the writer, and as the writer, you can make whatever rules you want. You can do whatever you want to your characters, but once you make the rules, then you have to follow them, because otherwise that breaks the suspension of disbelief. Having a good idea of what you want and is, I would say, more important than what your readers want. Because if you are suddenly bored with the story that you're writing anymore, then you're not going to want to engage in this solitary, repetitive, monotonous experience anymore. So write for what you think is cool, and if people enjoy it, then great. But if they don't enjoy it, ask yourself, why didn't they enjoy it, and why did I think it was cool, and have that shape your future creative processes. Yeah.
Hello. As a fellow fanfic writer, I ask you, have you ever tried testing the waters of crossing over MLP with another franchise?
Yes. I have attempted a crossover with Shadow of the Colossus that didn't go as well as I had liked. I've also done a crossover with Norse mythology. That one was done pretty well. That one's called Can't Choose Your Family. And that one was actually a pretty cool one to do. That was just a one-shot. But yeah, crossovers are really hard to do. They were talking about it earlier today. It's really difficult to get right. The whole idea is that it's not supposed to be 1 + 2 = 12. It's supposed to be 1 + 2 = 3. Were you here for the crossover panel for that? So you understand what I'm saying by that? Yeah.
Yeah, one thing I want to ask, even to the entire room here, is that one reason I like reading fan fiction, because there is just so much crap you have to wade through, so many bad stories, that when you find a good one, it feels even better when you find that one. Can you agree with that? Or if anyone in here, like, just raise your hand. It's like whenever there's like so many bad stories out there. You look for a couple, you read a couple of them, they're just really bad. And when you find that one that's really good, it feels all the better, you know? Like,
It does feel like, kind of like a treasure hunt almost sometimes. Again, the most effective means of sharing information is through word of mouth. And that's how you're going to get the best information on what fanfics are good. Everything else we can do as much as we can with technology, but, one more minute? Okay. You do as much as you can with technology, but again, it's going to wind up being you're going to trust the word of people over everything else. All right, go ahead. Last.
I keep seeing that fan fictions are released not as full, but in separate parts over time. Would you recommend that we finish the whole story first, or make it into small sections and we finish it over the course of time?
If you can resist the temptation, then yes, you should write the story from start to finish. A lot of writers find that very challenging to do. Yeah. Thank you. More question? Yeah, sure. What's up, man?
Okay, so that was a really interesting presentation, and I've been to a lot of interesting fanfic panels today, and I'm just curious about something. One of the things they said is if you're going to make a fanfic with your OC, and you're going to have the main 6 in it, and they said that you should introduce the main 6 first, and then let's say a little bit later on you should introduce your OC. But what if you're going to actually make your entire fanfic based on your OC, and your OC is telling the story? Should you have your OC be introduced very first in the beginning of the story, or you should still have the main 6 be introduced first?
My advice would be it's very difficult to do that well, and that if that is your first story, then hold off on it. You want to try and use the characters that are already established first, kind of use that as your starting template, and then once you feel confident with the basic rules of storytelling, then go in and start the story that you want to tell with your OC and have him be your first thing. But my advice, start with the main six, write a story or two with just them, then move on to more complicated things. Thank you.